Good morning and thank you for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle. Texas is now the first state to join the effort to defend President Donald Trump's travel ban. On Wednesday, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton filed documents with the San Francisco-based 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, asking the court to reconsider its decision that blocked the ban. Texas Solicitor General Scott Keller says the court made the wrong decision.
What the court did here essentially was say that every single person on this planet has rights under the U.S. Constitution. No court has ever said that before, and that conclusion is absurd.
The state's amicus brief says the ban on travelers from 7 predominantly Muslim nations is a legal exercise of presidential authority meant to keep the country safe from terrorists. Keller explained why Texas is getting involved in the case.
And here, the state of Texas and many other states too have a significant interest in protecting their residents. And yet the U.S. Supreme Court has said that the states themselves don't have power to control who is necessarily entering their borders. That's the job of the federal government, and that's precisely why the state has a significant interest here in this lawsuit.
Keller said the amicus brief is aimed to help President Trump's case as the appeal on the travel ban moves forward. Reports of tighter immigration enforcement are bringing more anxiety and anger in Texas and around the country. Here in Austin, hundreds of people took to the streets as part of the Day Without Immigrants rally. It was part of a nationwide event, but here in Texas, there was additional emotion. Right now, state lawmakers are poised to pass Senate Bill 4, which cracks down on so-called sanctuary cities. And there's worry that federal immigration agents are stepping up random raids. Republican State Senator Don Buckingham says there's a lot of misinformation going around.
The truth is, ICE goes off of leads and doesn't do random sweeps. The truth is about Senate Bill 4, we're for the first time ever actually putting in safety for victims and witnesses to crimes. No one's, what we're trying to do is get our criminals off the street, especially the ones that are illegal immigrants.
But some law enforcement agencies worry Senate Bill 4 could actually hurt efforts to catch criminals. Officers and deputies from San Antonio, Dallas, Houston, and El Paso came to the Capitol to express their concerns. They worry the bill could promote racial profiling and erode trust in law enforcement. They say Texas officers would need special training to deal with federal immigration laws, which SB 4 does not provide.
So now the burden, instead of on the federal government, whose job it is to do that, completely shifts to me and my personnel. I've got to train them. I've got to have more people to do that extra work. And if they mess up, guess who's getting sued? The local taxpayers.
Supporters of Senate Bill 4 say it will enforce the existing rule of law. SB 4 passed through the Senate earlier this month. A Texas House committee will soon take up the bill. For perspective, we turn to our roundtable. Morgan Smith with the Texas Tribune and Bob Garrett, the Austin Bureau reporter for the Dallas Morning News. Welcome, both of you.
Thanks for having us.
So let's talk a little bit about what's happening with sanctuary cities at the Capitol right now. It seems like it really is boiling over this past week.
Right. I mean, you had all the threats between Governor Abbott and Travis County, but now we're having marches almost every day down Congress Avenue. It appears that we've all along thought something would pass both chambers, something will get out of the House on Sanctuary City. Charlie Guerin, who is a powerful lieutenant to Speaker Strauss, is carrying the bill in the House, but this is seems to be igniting a lot of passion among the electorate, particularly among minorities.
We've had the Sanctuary City bill in past sessions. This one just seems to fire up people more.
Yeah, well, it's kind of taking place against this backdrop of kind of high emotion and fear over what might possibly happen with the Trump administration and its enforcement on immigration. We don't have a lot of hard numbers right now, but there are indications that ICE is stepping up raids, and we've had several instances across the state in Texas where people who it appears would not have been usually detained under the Obama administration have been detained. So it's there's just a lot of energy and kind of emotion and fear out there, I think.
How does those so-called raids, how have they been playing into the conversation at the Capitol?
Well, I think they are really heating it up, like you said, and Trump's Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly today had this directive relating to mobilizing the National Guard, and it's basically right there in the memo saying this is a deterrent to be geared up like this to people who think they're coming in. So, I mean, I don't think Donald Trump is backing down a bit. This is playing to his base. It's delivering on his promises, but how it will affect, you know, the rest of this legislative session, how it will affect midterm elections, boy, remains to be seen.
Yeah, the National Guard. That's something that you don't hear about every day.
Yeah.
What about, you know, how the sanctuary city bill is really affecting other pieces of legislation at the Capitol? Is it, you know, stalling conversation on other things that many people might consider more pressing?
Well, I think we're still in the point of the legislative session where it's hard, you know, there's not a lot of movement on other things, but you also have, you know, the bathroom bill, which now appears is going to be heard a little bit later than we might have expected.
But it's not one of the emergencies the government declared.
Exactly.
Sanctuary City is.
Right. Yeah. So I think that, you know, it is kind of natural that it would come exploding out of the gate at this point. But it's hard to see what the next few months hold with it.
If the sanctuary city bill does pass, I mean, what kind of future does it have after the legislative session? Surely it will be playing out in the courts for quite some time.
I think that's right. And interestingly, the city's lobbyists want to call it the Sanctuary County bill because it's really about jails. It's not that much about city police forces. And as you know, it was always a debate over what the term means and do we have very many that fit that. How many cities do that? So I think you'll see me in court on that, Josh.
And, you know, it's been attracting a lot of attention from, you know, college presidents and different school districts and obviously city leaders here in Austin. And it's not just a city issue, really. It affects so many different entities.
That's right. I mean, the campus presidents are under real pressure to say that they're not going to use campus police to round up students that are unauthorized immigrants. And you know, it ripples all the way through the culture, and that's why I think it is a kind of an interesting issue to watch as we roll forward to December and filing deadlines for the midterm election.
Will there be a lot of argument between the House and the Senate as far as what the sanctuary city bill is going to end up looking like?
I mean, I think that we have to just see, I think traditionally that this is something that has ended up stopping in the House, but I think I think that those details, there's probably going to be some behind closed doors negotiations and dealings that we're just going to have to keep an eye out for, I think, as reporters.
Well, don't forget the House did pass it one time under
true.
Speaker Strauss, but we don't want to go down that rabbit trail.
Right.
But I think there's these two chambers love to fight, so I could see them fighting over some of the terminology and provisions of this bill. I don't know that will happen. I think most people thought going into the session it's a foregone conclusion something's going to pass this time.
What do you think about the move that our Attorney General Ken Paxton made this week?
Well, he certainly is showing that he supports President Trump's efforts, his executive order on immigration, filed an amicus brief. You know, to some extent, the Attorney General of Texas cranking out amicus briefs and getting people involved is getting to be old news. You know, Ted Cruz really perfected that as an art form to kind of advance himself working for Greg Abbott. But we'll see if that has any influence on the Ninth Circuit, which is supposed to be the most liberal circuit of federal appeals courts. So I doubt they're going to pay that much attention to state attorneys general.
All right, but you two sit tight. We'll be joining you a little bit later, okay?
Will do.
Sounds good.
All right, police make dozens of arrests in Texas, targeting human trafficking, but operations like that don't do much to help victims of sex trafficking. A new series of reports looks at how the state often comes up short.
I urge you all to stop playing with reproductive health care as if it's your own political puppet.
Heated words and shattered desks. How a change in strategy and debate over abortion is bringing new tension to the state Senate. Texans got a reminder this week about the passion that the debate over abortion can bring. On Wednesday, the Senate Health and Human Services Committee took up 3 anti-abortion bills. All of them aim to protect the fetus. Opponents say the measures could put women's health at risk. Tensions rose when an abortion rights speaker reached the end of her testimony to the committee.
I want to remind you all, especially
Hennessy.
the doctors on this committee, that a vote for this bill puts women's
Thank you, Ms.
lives on the
Hennessy.
line.
Your time
I
is
urge
done.
you all to stop playing with reproductive health care as if it's your own political puppet. Thank you.
Thank you. Your time is done.
That was Committee Chairman Senator Charles Schwertner, a Republican from Georgetown, bringing the gavel down. The loud crack you heard was the glass breaking on his desk. Schwertner later quipped to a reporter that he may need to dial it back down to just 1 bowl of Wheaties in the morning. The bills before the Senate seem to indicate a change in the fight against abortion. Rachel Glazer takes a closer look at the debate.
Do I see Roe v. Wade going away in my lifetime? Man, I pray and hope, but probably not.
Texas Republicans are focused on the fetus, using a different strategy in the battle against abortion this session.
And it's unethical to put a baby through torturous, inhumane process.
Senator Charles Perry filed a bill to ban the most common procedure for second trimester abortions, if there is still a heartbeat.
That if we're going to allow these procedures, then the baby shouldn't suffer pain and actually die from the physical dismemberment of their body.
What the Lubbock Republican refers to as dismemberment abortions, the medical term for the procedure is dilation and evacuation, or D&E.
There's additional risk involved when you induce fetal demise. It takes the surgical instruments out of the physician's hands.
Opponents say the bill would make the procedure less safe for women.
The health of the woman is not the target of SB 415.
Republican Senator Don Huffine said the same about his bill that would require fetal remains be buried or cremated.
My bill strictly deals with the dignity of the unborn, and that is a profound purpose for the state of Texas.
Anti-abortion activists say now is the time to push the envelope on abortion restrictions, and Perry agrees.
That our current administration is going to elect people to the Supreme Court that believe in life and protect life. So from that aspect, it's encouraging.
Rachel Glazer, KXAN News.
The third bill senators discussed seeks to ban the sale and research of fetal tissue from elective abortions and partial birth abortions in Texas. The fight to stop human trafficking received special attention earlier this month in Texas. A sting led to dozens of arrests, but a new series of reports shows the state often drops the ball when it comes to helping the victims of sex trafficking. The fight to stop human trafficking received special attention earlier this month in Texas. Many in law enforcement believe big events like the Super Bowl bring an increase in human trafficking because of demand from people trying to buy sex. Houston ran a sting in the days before the big game. It ended with nearly 200 arrests. Most people were trying to buy sex, but they also arrested 9 people accused of trafficking people for sex. While law enforcement had success making arrests, that doesn't do much to help the people being trafficked. The Texas Tribune took a closer look at the impact on girls and young women being trafficked in a special series called Sold Out. Some of the reporting looked at how the state's child welfare system could be contributing to the problem. For perspective, we turn back to our roundtable, Morgan Smith and Bob Garrett. So Morgan, this was really compelling projects that you guys did. Kind of talk to me about the work that went into it and what really sparked your interest in this subject.
So sex trafficking is something that top elected officials and lawmakers have been talking about for years, almost every single session. There's been some type of large anti-sex trafficking bill that's passed, usually with bipartisan support, lots of press conferences, but it's still continued to be a problem, and a lot of these conversations about sex trafficking were divorced from conversations about fixing the child welfare system, looking at the problems in the juvenile justice system that might be either exacerbating it or not taking full advantage that these state agencies have to prevent this population of vulnerable youth from being targeted for sexual exploitation.
That link seems like that might be something that catches lawmakers' attention, especially when we think about all of the work they want to do to the CPS system this session. Is that something you think is likely?
Well, I can tell you I've sat through some long hearings already on Child Protective Services, and the members of the Senate Finance Committee, for instance, palpably kind of moved forward in their chairs when the subject of sex trafficking came up. It definitely it definitely grabs them, and we'll see what they do. I mean, they are in the midst of a huge job, which they say they're going to do, fix CPS and foster care. Whether they're going to spend the money that requires and find other solutions, we remain skeptical and have to see, because you know they've had a long time to fix this system, and so far they haven't.
What kind of feedback have you gotten from lawmakers right now?
So I've been, along with two of my colleagues, we've been talking to lawmakers around the Capitol all this week, and it's been interesting to see how many of them are actually surprised, even those who want to be involved in reforms to the child welfare system or the criminal justice system. How many of them told us, we really had no idea that there was this link between child sex trafficking victims and the child welfare service. And when we're looking at that, we're referring specifically to national data that shows most kids who are child sex trafficking victims have had some contact with Child Protective Services, along with a state study that was recently released that shows the same is true in Texas. But lawmakers just are not kind of putting two and two together, and so there's a hope that perhaps the people that care about doing something about sex trafficking might also feel that means they also have to do something about funding child welfare. But again, this is the Capitol, and funding is always the hardest part of the conversation and the hardest thing to get done. So,
for our viewers, where were the places in Texas that were, the highlights of your reporting?
So really, we found cases across the state of Texas. We ended up in our stories featuring victims who were from Austin, Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio, and that actually wasn't intentional. It just kind of shook out that way, but really this is something that affects every community in Texas, and it can be a mobile thing, traveling I-35, I-10, but it's also something that is can be very local in neighborhoods, and doesn't have to involve actually moving someone from one place to another.
Mm-hmm. As I understand it, Morgan, and you may have gotten into this, but both in the foster care system and with CPS workers, it takes some training to know how to deal with these mostly young women, to even get them to acknowledge what's happened to them, because they are so used to not giving up any whiff of what they've been up to or how they've been victimized, and then they tend to just vanish pretty quickly. I don't know if that's what you found.
Absolutely. I think one of the ways that these kids have been able to survive in these kind of terrible circumstances is that they're really good at running away from places. They're really good at just not opening up to people. They don't trust adults or authority figures, and sometimes part of the psychological conditioning that goes into that their pimps use to get them to do these things is basically telling them that I'm the only person that cares about you. If anyone else knew about the kinds of things that you've been doing, they would lock you up. They won't care about you. So it's very difficult to get these victims and to get kids who are in this situation to actually disclose that they are victims.
I think, when you watch testimony at any committee hearing, the most compelling testimony is from the people that directly involves, and this is clearly a difficult topic for many of those young people to talk about. So it's so great that your reporting was able to focus on the real people and talk to those people about a subject that frankly isn't something that many people want to talk about.
Yeah, and it's difficult because we have 4 stories that are focused on different cases, and we were able to actually speak to the girls that were involved in 3 of those 4 cases, and one we actually were just never able to track down. And I think that speaks to just the difficult nature of this crime and of the people that are suffering in this world, is that it's hard to find their voices, and it's hard to, bring them into a setting like the Capitol to testify in front of a committee, because, they're often gone. They don't have cell phones. They're maybe on Facebook, but it's just very hard to kind of capture their stories.
Well, if you haven't checked out Sold Out with the Texas Tribune's project online, do so. We'll put a link on this story for State of Texas on kxan.com. Thank you both for being with us. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Josh.
All right, and thank you for joining us for State of Texas. Stay tuned for Meet the Press coming up at 9. I'm Josh Hinkle. Have a great day.